The wind sweeps across the endless plains of Russia, carrying with it a silence that feels unnatural, the calm before a storm that will devour hundreds of thousands. It is the summer of 1942. The German Wehrmacht, once unstoppable, stretches like a blade across the Soviet Union. Its edge points toward one name, Stalingrad. Hitler's voice echoes through the Reich Chancellery. That city bears the name of Stalin. It must fall for Berlin. It is prestige. For the soldiers, it is another name on a map until they reach it, until they see what waits for them there. The Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus, moves east under a blazing sun. Columns of trucks, tanks, and horses stretch for miles across the steppe. Dust rises, engines groan, and the men stare into the horizon. They have fought since the snows of Moscow, through fields littered with wreckage, villages burned to ashes, and the endless roar of artillery. They are veterans now, lean, silent, hardened, yet none can imagine what lies ahead. By August, the Luftwaffe begins its assault. The sky above the Volga turns black with aircraft, Stukas, Heinkels, Dorniers, their engines screaming as they dive. Bombs fall like rain. The city of Stalingrad is torn apart in days. Whole blocks vanish under clouds of dust and flame. Civilians run through the streets clutching children, their faces gray with ash. Firestorms roll through the ruins, devouring everything, wood, stone, and flesh alike. When the German infantry finally advances, they find not a city, but a skeleton. Buildings are nothing but hollow shells, streets are filled with debris, and the air stinks of smoke and death. Yet from these ruins the Soviets rise. Snipers hide in shattered windows. Machine guns nest behind broken walls. Every street, every room, every pile of rubble becomes a fortress. The Germans call it Rattenkrieg, the Rat War. They fight room to room, floor to floor, sometimes separated from the enemy by a single wall. A man can hear his opponent breathing through the cracks. The sounds of war change, no longer the open thunder of tanks, but the close, suffocating crack of rifles, the metallic click of grenades, the scream of bayonets meeting flesh. Corporal Heinz Müller, 24 years old, writes in his diary, "We move through the ruins like ghosts. Every corner hides death. The Russians fight for every brick. There is no day or night, only the firelight. The Volga River, once a broad silver ribbon, now churns with the wrecks of burning boats. Soviet reinforcements cross under artillery fire, rowing through flames and corpses. Stalin's order is simple, not one step back. Those who retreat are shot by their own. German tanks try to advance but find themselves trapped among ruins. Streets are too narrow, buildings too close. Snipers hunt the commanders. Anti-tank rifles hide in basements. The air is filled with dust and screams. The men of the Sixth Army begin to realize Stalingrad is not a battle, it is a trap. By late September, the Germans hold most of the city, but it means nothing. Every gain costs blood. A single factory changes hands 5 times in 1 week. The Red October, the Barricade, and the tractor plant, names that become synonymous with hell. Soldiers fight among the machines, bodies lying on conveyor belts, oil and blood mixing on the floor. Night falls, but there is no silence. Flares light the sky like ghosts, illuminating twisted metal and shattered faces. In cellars, German soldiers huddle around candles, listening to the groan of the wounded. They write letters home they know will never be sent. In one corner of the city, a Soviet sniper named Vasily Zaitsev begins his hunt. He kills silently, one shot at a time, moving through the ruins like a shadow. For every German who falls, the fear spreads. They start whispering his name. Winter begins to creep in. The wind grows colder, the nights longer. Food runs short. The Volga freezes. Men start wearing the same socks for weeks, sharing scraps of bread, burning anything they can find, doors, furniture, even books, to keep warm. Still, the orders come. Advance. clear the city. They push on through fire and snow, through smoke and silence, and then, one morning, they hear it, a low, distant rumble, the sound of thunder that is not thunder. The earth begins to shake. On the horizon, new Soviet formations are gathering, fresh, rested, waiting. The men of the Sixth Army, deep inside the ruins of Stalingrad, look up from their foxholes and realize the war around them is about to change. They have no idea that the hunter will soon become the hunted, that this city will become their grave, and that in the frozen winter ahead, the name Stalingrad will be written in blood and remembered for eternity. November 19th, 1942. The frozen wind howls across the Russian steppe. Snow drifts like smoke over the endless plains north of Stalingrad. Deep in their trenches, the men of the German Sixth Army brace against the cold, unaware that the sky itself is about to fall upon them. At 7:30 in the morning, the first Soviet guns open fire. A wall of sound erupts, a roar that shakes the earth for miles. The bombardment rolls over the steppe like thunder, smashing into the Romanian lines that guard the German flanks. Shells scream, soil erupts, horses rear in terror. In minutes, the front dissolves into chaos. This is Operation Uranus, Stalin's great counteroffensive. Two massive Soviet armies surge forward from the north and the south, aiming to meet behind Stalingrad and trap the entire Sixth Army inside. For months, the Germans have fought street by street, bleeding for every brick of the city. But outside, their lines are thin, stretched, and held by exhausted allies, Romanian, Italian, Hungarian troops with little anti-tank weaponry. Against them come Soviet T-34s, engines growling, tracks grinding over the frozen mud, red stars gleaming through the snow. Within hours, the Romanian defenses collapse. German officers radio for reinforcements. None come. The roads are clogged with snow and wreckage. The sky fills with the howl of Katyusha rockets, shrieking arcs of fire cutting across the gray morning. The fields burn red. By November 23rd, the jaws close. North and south Soviet forces link near Kalak on the Don River, sealing the trap. The Sixth Army, over 250,000 men, is surrounded. Inside the city, the news spreads slowly like a whisper. At first, disbelief, then silence. The men stare at each other, frost clinging to their beards, and understand they are alone. General Paulus radios Berlin. Hitler's response comes swiftly. The Sixth Army will stand fast. Supplies will be flown in. There will be no retreat. The soldiers look to the sky for salvation, but the sky offers only snow. The Luftwaffe promises to deliver 500 tons of supplies a day. It manages less than 100. The rest, ammunition, fuel, food, never arrives. The planes that make it through face blizzards, flak, and Soviet fighters. Many never return. The once proud army of the Reich now begins to starve. A loaf of bread becomes a treasure. Men boil leather belts for soup. They eat horses, dogs, anything they can find. Fuel runs out. Tanks freeze in place, their guns pointing uselessly into the snow. The city becomes a frozen tomb. Every breath turns to vapor. Every movement echoes in the silence. The wounded lie in cellars covered in rags, whispering prayers to a God who no longer answers. Frostbite blackens fingers and faces. The stench of death hangs over everything. Still, they fight. At the tractor factory, the Red October plant, and the grain elevator, small groups of Germans hold out against endless Soviet assaults. In the ruins of a single building, perhaps 50 meters wide, a few dozen men can hold for days until the walls crumble and the grenades find them. Outside the pocket, the Soviets tighten the noose. They bombard the perimeter day and night. They know time is their ally. The cold will finish what the artillery cannot. By December, Field Marshal Manstein launches Operation Winter Storm, an attempt to break through and rescue Paulus's army. German armor claws forward across the snow, fighting through Soviet defenses. For a moment, hope flickers inside the pocket. Men listen to the distant rumble of tank engines, so close they can almost hear salvation. But the relief force never reaches them. Manstein is stopped at the Mishkova River, just 50 kilometers away. Hitler forbids Paulus to attempt a breakout. The order stands: hold Stalingrad. Christmas arrives under artillery fire. The men share their last rations, singing carols in cracked voices. In the freezing bunkers, candles burn low beside pictures of families they will never see again. Snow drifts through the broken roofs. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of Soviet loudspeakers echoes. Propaganda broadcasts offering surrender and life. The men turn away, clutching their rifles. The once glorious Sixth Army is no longer an army. It is a collection of frozen souls trapped in a sea of ruin. As the new year dawns, 1943, the Red Army prepares for the final blow. The German soldiers stare across the frozen wasteland, their uniforms torn, their ammunition gone, their dreams buried beneath the snow. They are not fighting for victory anymore. They are fighting to survive one more day. And beyond the Volga, the Soviet guns are loading again. The storm is coming, one last time. January 1943. Stalingrad is a corpse of a city. What was once a sprawling industrial hub on the Volga has become a wasteland of broken walls and frozen bodies. Snow and ash mix into a gray blanket that hides the dead, but not their smell. It seeps through everything, every corner, every trench, every breath the survivors take. The wind no longer feels like air. It cuts like a knife, sharp and merciless. The temperature sinks to minus 30 degrees, and the men of the Sixth Army fight not against the Soviets anymore, but against the cold, the hunger, and the creeping realization that there will be no rescue. Inside a shattered basement near the Red October factory, a group of soldiers share the last of their rations, a few crusts of frozen bread, boiled in dirty snowmelt. Their faces are hollow, eyes sunken, lips split and bleeding from frostbite. They have not slept properly in weeks. When they talk, their voices come out as whispers, as if the city itself might hear them. The radios crackle with static. Every hour, headquarters sends the same message to Berlin, requests for ammunition, for fuel, for mercy. And every hour, the reply comes back like a curse. Hold your positions. Reinforcements are on the way, but none ever come. The Luftwaffe's airdrops have nearly stopped. Those few planes that dare to cross the Soviet lines are ripped from the sky by flak or fighters. The men watch from below as burning aircraft tumble down through the snow, leaving trails of black smoke across the clouds. Each one carries food they will never taste, medicine they will never receive. Across the lines, the Red Army tightens its grip. Stalin's generals, Rokossovsky, Zhukov, and Vasilevsky, move methodically, closing the noose around the dying German army. Soviet loudspeakers blare through the ruins, promising food and life to those who surrender. Some men listen. A few crawl through the snow at night toward the enemy lines. Most are shot before they ever get there. Paulus, pale and hollow-eyed, still clings to his duty. Inside the command post at Gumrak Airfield, maps are spread across tables covered with frost. The lines drawn in blue pencil, the German positions, are shrinking every day. By mid-January, the pocket is split in two. Communication breaks down. Units vanish from the radio. Entire regiments simply cease to exist. Outside, the hospitals overflow. There's no more morphine, no bandages. The wounded lie on the floor, packed together like cordwood, moaning softly in the dark. Some die with their eyes open, frozen in place. Rats scurry across their boots, unafraid. Letters home are written on scraps of paper, on pieces of maps, on the backs of ration boxes. Dear Mother, we are surrounded, but still fighting. The cold is unbearable. Tell Anna I think of her. Most of those letters will never leave the pocket. The men have begun to look like shadows, gray, thin, hollow-cheeked. They wrap rags around their feet when their boots fall apart. Frost gathers in their beards and eyebrows. Their rifles freeze. They urinate on the bolts to make them move again. Hunger gnaws at them until some lose their minds. In one unit, men are caught boiling horse bones to suck out the last bit of fat. In another, there are whispers, darker ones, about what happens when even that runs out. And still they fight. In the ruins of a single building, a handful of Germans hold off wave after wave of Soviet infantry. Grenades explode at arm's length. Machine guns chatter until they jam from the cold. When the ammunition runs out, the bayonets come out, then the shovels, then the fists. Every day the city shrinks. Every night the shelling never stops. Each explosion sends clouds of snow and dust into the air, drifting slowly back down over the ruins, like ash over a funeral pyre. By late January, the Sixth Army is dying. Gumrak airfield falls. There are no more flights, no more hope. Paulus reports to Hitler, "The situation is hopeless." Hitler promotes him to field marshal, the highest rank in the German army. No German field marshal has ever surrendered before. The message is clear. He is to die in Stalingrad. But Paulus does not die. Not yet. He watches as his army collapses around him, men too weak to stand, soldiers stumbling through snow like ghosts, officers burning maps because they have no fuel left. On January 30th, the anniversary of Hitler's rise to power, the Führer delivers a radio speech to the German people. His voice trembles with anger and denial. He calls the men of Stalingrad heroes. He promises vengeance. But his words are empty now, carried over 1,000 kilometers of frozen air to men who no longer believe in anything. The next morning, the Soviets launch their final assault. Tanks roll through the ruins, guns blazing. The sky turns white with snow and smoke. The last defenders fight with whatever they have left. Some raise their hands, others fall where they stand. The city that had devoured so many now falls silent again, and in the shattered heart of Stalingrad, surrounded by death and ruin, Field Marshal Paulus makes his choice. He orders a ceasefire. The Sixth Army, once the pride of the Wehrmacht, has ceased to exist. February 2nd, 1943. The guns fall silent. The last echoes of battle fade into the howling wind that sweeps across the ruins of Stalingrad. Smoke rises from the shattered city, thin gray columns that twist upward into the pale winter sky, like the souls of the dead leaving the earth. The once mighty Sixth Army is gone. Of more than 250,000 men, only a fraction still breathe, starving, frost-bitten, hollow-eyed remnants of a force that once marched with thunder across Europe. Their rifles lie abandoned in the snow. Their hands are raised. Their faces are gray with exhaustion and disbelief. The Soviet soldiers who surround them move cautiously through the ruins, weapons still ready. What they find defies imagination. Frozen corpses stacked like walls, horses gnawed to the bone, cellars filled with men too weak to stand, whispering for water or mercy. The stench of rot clings to everything. Inside the wrecked basement of the Univermag department store, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus sits at a wooden table. His uniform is torn, his cap gone. The map before him is meaningless now. The blue lines that once marked German positions are nothing but ghosts. When the Soviet officers enter, Paulus barely looks up. He signs the surrender papers with trembling hands. The war in Stalingrad is over. Outside, the city looks like the surface of another planet. Buildings have no walls, only blackened ribs of steel reaching toward the sky. The Volga lies frozen and cracked, its surface scattered with wreckage, the remains of boats, guns, and men. The snow glows faintly in the dim winter light, hiding rivers of blood beneath. For the Germans who survive, the nightmare is not over. Columns of prisoners, gaunt, frostbitten, many without boots, begin the long march into captivity. They shuffle through the snow in silence, their breath rising like smoke. Soviet guards walk beside them, watching but saying nothing. For every 100 men who begin the march, only a handful will ever see home again. In one group, a young soldier carries a photograph of his wife, tucked into his torn jacket. He stumbles, falls, and doesn't get up. The photo slips from his hand, carried away by the wind. No one stops. No one can. For the Soviet soldiers, victory tastes like ashes. They have reclaimed the city that bore their leader's name, but at a cost beyond measure. The streets are littered with their dead, frozen where they fell. The river runs red beneath the ice. Still, as the red flag rises over the ruins, a great cry rolls through the smoke. Stalingrad is ours! Across the world, the news spreads like wildfire. In Berlin, the shock is total. Hitler rages in silence, refusing to believe that his greatest army has vanished. Goebbels calls it a heroic tragedy. But no words can disguise what has happened. The myth of German invincibility has been shattered. From London to Washington to Moscow, one thought echoes through every command center. The tide has turned. For the German soldiers who remain on the Eastern Front, the loss of Stalingrad feels like a wound that will never heal. Letters from survivors, those who somehow make it back years later, speak of hunger, madness, and endless marches through snow. Most never return. Of the 90,000 taken prisoner, fewer than 6,000 will ever see Germany again. The rest vanish into the gulags, buried beneath the cold Russian soil. And yet, for all its horror, Stalingrad is not merely a story of defeat. It is the moment when the world itself seemed to shift. The endless advance of the Reich halted in that frozen ruin. From this point on, Germany will retreat step by step, all the way back across Europe, leaving behind a trail of shattered dreams and burned cities. The camera pans slowly across the battlefield, a rusted helmet half buried in snow, a rifle frozen upright in the ice, a child's doll lying in the ruins of a house that no longer exists. Snow begins to fall again, soft and silent, covering the scars of war. The wind whispers through the broken walls, carrying no words, only the memory of voices long gone. Stalingrad is quiet now. The engines have stopped. The fires have burned out. Only the ghosts remain of men who came here believing they would conquer history and instead became part of it. In the end, there is no victory, only survival. And the whisper of the wind over the Volga, carrying a lesson written in the cold, that no empire, no army, no ambition can stand forever against the relentless will of human endurance. The city stands again today, rebuilt from its ashes, scarred but alive. But beneath its streets, beneath the hum of modern life, the ground still remembers. Every brick, every shadow, every gust of wind still carries the echo of that terrible winter when the world froze and history was rewritten in blood and snow. This was Stalingrad, the grave of an army, the turning of the war, and the day humanity learned what it truly costs to conquer a city and lose a soul.